You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Bills and Locked On Dolphins. We're both proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, we want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. We're here to get you ready for Week 3, Thursday Night Football in Orchard Park. The Bills hosting the Miami Dolphins. And Kyle, welcome in. Excited to break this football game down with you.
Oh, I'm excited. And I'm sure everybody's wondering why they're watching a crossover Thursday episode potentially as early as mid-afternoon on Wednesday. That's what happens when you play on Thursday, right? We get to a crossover Thursday and post it the same day as the game. We got to give everybody enough time to get prepped for the contest, which I'm excited for as well, but probably very different reasons than you are.
Well, let's get into those dynamics. Miami entering this game 0-2. What's the big storyline, the big talk out of Miami right now?
To quote Mike McDaniel, today is another day closer to death. And this feels like a franchise that's in kind of a death spiral right now, where after the first 2 weeks with the games where you get smashed by the Colts, and then last week you have a narrow loss with a bunch of self-inflicted wounds on the offensive side of the ball trying to mount a game-winning drive. There's been increasing instances of friction with everybody kind of feeling the pressure to win. And Stephen Ross put a statement out after the Week 18 game last year, voicing his confidence in the direction of the football operation. And it gave him this offseason to try to right some of the wrongs and what had kind of been a part of what Chris Greer described as not winning the right way during the early chapters of the Mike McDaniel era, as far as bringing in expensive veterans and those guys kind of running the building, really. And everybody talked a big game. Everybody said all the right things. And then the team came out as flat could be in week 1. And then in week 2, the players are voicing frustration with the coaches for the personnel packages and the communication. And the coach in week 1 is talking to the players through the media. And then the players have a behind closed doors meeting where they're talking about playing with accountability for each other and themselves, because the league's going to judge them in a vacuum and doesn't care what the coaching situation is. That according to Albert Breer. So it's just, we're mounding up. And the question is for me, less of the matchups in the game, because we know what a lot of those matchups are. We're going to talk about them and exhaust those talking points, but it's who's going to show up? What kind of team investment is there going to be for this game after you kind of felt like you mounted up the pride and you played hard last week, and the defense started slow and then kind of buckled down throughout? There was a couple explosive plays that led to some shorter fields and some field goals and scores, and that helped decide the game. And then the offense imploded twice in the final 4 minutes with efforts to win the game.
Let me zoom out on Miami and kind of phrase this a certain way, and I'm curious how you respond to this. So obviously there's a lot of tension. I think there's a lot of expectation that this team has lost itself, and we're expecting at some point for them to move on from Mike McDaniel. But if I do zoom out, this is year 4. First 2 years, this team goes to the playoffs. Last year, they're 8-9, and the starting quarterback misses 6 games.
Yeah.
Of course, we know that the Colts game was a disaster. I don't have anything silver lining there. But are we really just 1 inch away? De'Von Achane steps out of bounds, like 1 inch away from that being a team that rallied and came from behind and probably, had a great chance to win a football game. And you're talking about, all right, if they're 1-1 going into Buffalo, there's obviously that's not been a very good path for the Miami Dolphins over the last several years, but a schedule that appears manageable. Are we getting ahead of ourselves? Do we need to kind of be mindful of some of those layers, or is this just a coach that's lost the locker room?
So I don't think it's the win record, right? In the same way that they dismissed Brian Flores after they came back from a 1-7 start to finish 9-8. And that was back in 2021. It's the beneath the surface stuff that now in the face of this pressure and adversity, you're seeing it bubble to the surface with more frequency. You had Mike McDaniel after the week 2 game talk about everything starts and ends with me. I take responsibility for it. But then in the same breath says, I need to oversee the personnel packages because coaches and players in a critical moment of the game didn't communicate the way that they needed to. And then Frank Smith, the team's offensive coordinator, who's not the play caller, is asked about the play calling in the second half. He's like, yeah, we went back and we found some instances where we got away from the run. Okay, who are you talking to then? You're talking to Mike McDaniel, who calls the plays, in the same way that Mike McDaniel's talking to whatever coaches are responsibility for the personnel packages when you're breaking the huddle with 13 guys off of a 3-minute stoppage and play out a commercial timeout on the 26-yard line on 1st and 10, the minute left in the game to try to win the game. So the competitiveness at times has been in spite of itself with what's going on underneath the hood. So the question for when you choose to make a change in my mind is, when does Stephen Ross say enough is enough? How much of a look do I want to get at any other coach on the staff, potentially on an interim basis, to try to find value for this season? Because once you get to 0-3, there's been one team that's made it to 0-3 since 2000 that's made the playoffs. It was the Texans in 2018. They went 11-5 and won the division. If you go 0-3 with 2 losses in the division, can we have this conversation about what the outlook's going to be? Like, you're not chasing down anybody in the AFC East at that point. Not with the back half of the schedule looking like what it looks like, even if they mount up and they find some wins. I'd be very surprised. So that's the lead story in Miami for Buffalo. Now, you guys start 2-0, convincing win against the Jets, the big comeback in the fourth quarter against the Baltimore Ravens in week 1. How have things looked? I know there's some questions for the defensive side of the ball for how things went early against Baltimore, but was that matchup based? How do you reflect on the defense? I think would be my big storyline that I'd love to hear from you on.
Well, obviously, a lot of issues in week 1 against Baltimore, which is widely understood as just a very bad matchup structurally for how the Bills choose to play defense and what Baltimore has at its disposal. And they gave up 40 points and tons of explosive plays. And, Josh Allen was able to put the cape on and accounts for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, 250 passing yards in the fourth quarter alone. And you have a lot of things that go right for you to win a football game. You fast forward 1 week, and it's a really different performance where the Jets go 0 for 11 on third downs. They can't really run it. They can't really throw it. And the Bills defense looked a lot different. And I certainly think there's a lot of context that's necessary to really reflect on that performance. And obviously it starts with who the Jets are, right? They're not the Ravens. That's important to note. They don't really have much in the way of playmakers outside of Garrett Wilson, an offensive line that's potent but very young, and Justin Fields, who there's a reason he's on his 3rd team, despite being a first-round pick not that long ago. And so I think that context matters. And the Bills are up 10 with 5 minutes left in the first quarter, and you start to really dominate this game script. And the Jets needed that to go a certain way, right? They needed to keep it close and run the ball, and they got out of their script and it got goofy, right? That's kind of what happened. So you are pleased with the week-over-week improvements, right? There's only one thing they could have done is go play the Jets, right? They can't play any other team, so they answered the questions coming out for week 1. But obviously, it's about how this unit stabilizes. They're going to get some reinforcements, whether that is Annette Oliver or Michael Hoyt. Larry Ogunjobi will be off a suspension. Maxwell Harrison, the first-round pick, is on IR. He shouldn't be gone for too much longer. So there's some reinforcements, but also a Bills defense that's different. They're not giving light boxes all the time. They're playing base defense, right? 3 linebackers on the field. They're blitzing more than usual. They're playing more man coverage than usual. And you think about the addition of Ryan Nielsen to this coaching staff, and those shifts are very much towards the ideologies that he's told us he's about from his time with the Jaguars, the Falcons, and the Saints. So you have a lot of new with this Bills defense, which is probably necessary after it's been the reason in the playoffs you've not been able to go beyond Kansas City. So polar opposite performances, and now it's about this next matchup against Miami. All right, folks. Storylines out of the way. Coming up next, matchups that will change the game. We'll break that down here for you. Be sure to stick with us. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to the available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And I love this, all-wheel drive is standard in every crossover SUV, so you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Joe Marino, Kyle Crabbs, here to get you ready for Thursday Night Football in Orchard Park. Bills Dolphins Week 3. We're next going to focus in on matchups that will change this game, that will decide this game. And the one, Kyle, for me that I am really paying attention to is Joey Bosa for the Bills on defense against the offensive line, the offensive tackles in particular for Miami. Patrick Paul at left tackle. Feels like he's probably been one of the better players on that offensive line. But Larry Borum on the right side, obviously Austin Jackson, the preferred starter. He's hurt there. And, I think there's some challenges with this offensive line, whether it's been Savianaya and him getting off the ground here as a rookie.
Yeah.
And then the entire right side is right. It's not the intended starters. They're already on injured reserve. And Joey Bosa's hot. He played really well against Baltimore. And you felt like he was close to making some big-time impact plays in that game. And then you fast forward to the Jets and those young offensive tackles and Justin Fields. And, he had 15 pass rush snaps, had 7 pressures, a sack, and 2 forced fumbles on those 15 pass rush plays. He's playing really well. He's talking about being back in a hand-in-the-dirt role, right? He's a rush outside linebacker with the Chargers. The guy's 6'5", 280. He's like, he even said this week, he's like, my body type is much better for this style of defense, lining up as a 6-eye and being more of a power player that's tighter, that's closer to the action. And it looks really good so far. And it feels like he's got a big opportunity here against this Dolphins offensive line.
Yeah, I hope he gets the matchups against Patrick Paul, not for like wins and losses of reps, but the measure for Patrick Paul, where he was one of the overachievers of training camp. And in the preseason, he's looked great. I think the Dolphins should feel really excited about the long-term look there, regardless of what the long-term future and direction looks like. He's made major strides and really impressive. Now, the thing that can kind of help with what you're talking about and avoid the Dolphins avoiding that is a positive game script, which they've had none of in either of the first 2 games, right? The third time the Dolphins touched the ball against the Colts, they were down 3 scores. And the second time they touched the ball against the Patriots, they were down 2 scores. They have started very slow. I asked for Mike McDaniel, if he won the coin toss in week 2, to take the ball to try to, hey, maybe let's a lot of your offensive line personnel moves, including Larry Borum, including Jonas Savianaya, including James Daniels, who's on IR along with Austin Jackson, was to be more physical and have more displacement abilities. This team's dead last in the NFL in rush attempts with 27 rush attempts through 2 games. I would love to see that be part of their puzzle for trying to offset Joey Bosa, who is hot. And I think the interior matchups can help dictate this a little bit too, where Ed Oliver with the ankle being down for this game, presumably we're probably fair to make this assumption. The final injury report comes out.
He was in a boot yesterday, Kyle. I don't think he's playing.
So, and it's the risk of recording ahead of time, right?
Sure.
And we're going to post as the injury reports drop for tomorrow's game for final designations, right? So, but Milton Williams and Christian Barmore tore Savianaya and Keon Smith as the guards apart in week 2. Those guys really struggled. I thought Larry Borum was sufficient through the lens of you're a swing tackle, utility player. I think he's a good fit for what they want to do offensively, but they haven't been able to lean into what they want to be offensively because of the game scripts. So it's the TJ Sanders of the world. It's the Javon Solomons, who we talked about yesterday, as a guy who reduced inside to get some rush opportunities inside, right? It's the Daquan Joneses of the world. The Deion Walkers of the world, those guys matching up against Keon Smith and Jonas Savianaya at the guards, I think have potential for, if the Bills are going to have a lot of disruption against a Tua Tagovailoa who's negotiating pressure less effectively this year than what he has in years past, that's going to come in part due to those matchups in the B gaps. I think that's really critical success failure recipe for both teams.
Yeah, and I can see some that going both ways, right? Like, I don't know that you look at it as a decided advantage for either team because you're down if you're Buffalo, you're down if you're with Miami with the guards as well. And so who gets the better hand of that, I think is really important. And I think both teams will be looking to see their young interior players play well in this one. You can't help but look at this Miami team and realize how much they're giving the ball to De'Von Achane, right? I mean, he's the highest targeted player, right? He's targeted more than any of your players so far. And you mentioned they've ran the ball 27 times. Well, 18 times it's been to De'Von Achane, and the next guy on the team that's carried the ball is Malik Washington, the slot receiver, with 4 carries. It feels like that's an important player for the Bills to be mindful of, right? And he's potent, man. I mean, obviously he's a dynamic playmaker. He's not a do-everything back, but he's explosive. He's elusive. He's given the Bills trouble in the past. And, I think obviously he can do a lot, but that's the guy for Buffalo to me. I mean, with an offense that has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you're mindful of them, of course, but De'Von Achane feels like the key for Buffalo's defense in this game. Yeah,
and I think the matchups in the middle of the field where the Dolphins don't have a lot of involvement from the tight end, I think Achane and how they spaced him relative to Waddle and Hill against New England was refreshing, because with all due respect to the game plans that the Dolphins are putting together, I don't care what kind of cover 2 shell coverages you're getting. If teams have to triangulate Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and De'Von Achane with the alignment versatility of those guys with motions or putting them on the same side or putting one of them in the backfield, Waddle had some snaps out of the backfield in week 2. That's enough speed and stress that you should be able to find enough ways to make sure that those guys are the guys that are touching the football and you put the ball in their hands effectively, right? And in week 1, it was Waddle had 3 for 30 and Hill had 4 for 40. And Achane, has kind of been the safety blanket in that regard, and putting him in the backfield and his involvement in the passing game with the screen game, which has been dialed down thus far through 2 games, which I think is a good thing relative to how much of a crutch of it was for the run game last year, has been good. But I certainly think that's a key matchup for Miami to use Achane and then play off of how Buffalo responds to him to make sure that Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill touch the ball an appropriate amount of times, and you're finding opportunities where you're not forcing the ball to them in opportune moments when Sean McDermott and the defense are choosing to take those players away. So I think that's a big key matchup as well. One I would point to, Joe, James Cook and Dalton Kincaid in the middle of the field against a familiar face, Tyrell Dodson. Dodson, I don't know what the Pro Football Focus grades are saying. Well, I know what their grades are saying.
We know all about it.
It doesn't match the tape that I'm watching.
Good downhill player. Good downhill player.
Good downhill player. New England had some opportunities with really finding space in the middle of the field. Even some of the downhill stuff against New England, where you had some chunk runs, not explosive runs in the standard of what James Cook is doing as far as hitting explosive runs, but chunk runs, 8+ yard runs, where we're fitting and maybe we're fitting a little late, we're a little passive, and then they do tight end throwback off of it, and the tight end runs right across your face, and you're worried about the guy that's going away, and you're leaving your coverage area. That has the potential to yield a lot of chunks for Miami if they don't get it dialed up. And Anthony Weaver gave a nice vote of confidence for the job that Tyrell Dodson's doing as the green dot player for the Dolphins defense so far this season. But the tape that I have watched and how I interpret the assignments that they're running paints a little bit of a different picture than the grades that you get when you log on to the metric sites and they give their game grade out of 100.
Well, and Miami's playing a lot of base defense, right? I mean, so with some of the challenges with the slot and lack of experience there, Kohu not being available, it's probably putting even more on him. And I've kind of wondered, what's the plan for Willie Gay? He's played 3 snaps in 2 games. They don't have a
plan for Willie Gay right now.
Well, so that's obviously an opportunity for Buffalo, where you mentioned Cook, you mentioned Kincaid. They like to throw the ball to Ty Johnson. Shakir really hasn't gotten going yet this year. And so, if that's going to be a void, that's certainly an area for Josh Allen to look to go on Thursday night. All right, coming up next, we are going to dive into the path to victory for each team, what they need to do to get a win. We'll do that here next. So, folks, be sure to stick with us. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is about how portable they are. They're big taste and a tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get the boost you need when you need it. I've been eyeing the new limited time cranberry lime flavor. It sounds like the perfect one to try next. And honestly, I just love how fast it kicks in, and it's sugar-free, so I don't have to worry about crashing later on. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in-store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing on Prize Picks lately, and I love how fun it is. It's a great way to stay locked in for the season and checking out those projections like Josh Allen, more or less than 270 passing yards, or Saquon Barkley for more or less than 1 rushing touchdown. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Joe Marino, Kyle Crabbs, Locked On Podcast Network crossover Thursday. We're now going to dive into what each team needs to do to win. I've got 3 things down. Kyle, what's number 1 for you with Miami?
The Dolphins have to be better on first and second down defensively. The numbers are pretty jarring as far as third down conversions and fourth down conversions, where they're over 50%, and it's over 80% when it's short yardage opportunities, where it's 3 yards or less. And that's been more than half of the Dolphins' third and fourth downs that they faced through the first 2 games. They are playing a little too soft. They're playing one of the highest instances of cover 2 for their zone matrix through the first 2 weeks of the year. And the spacing has not been where it needs to be. And it's creating a bunch of easy completions underneath that have led to third and shorts. And when the entire identity of the defense is we've got a really good edge group, and we've got some talented interior players, whether they're young guys like Kenneth Grant, who you're waiting to see some of the splash plays. I think he showed some progress in week 2 as far as some of the twists and pick games that the Dolphins like to play with Zach Sealer. And then Zach Sealer himself, you can't showcase that on 3rd and 2. You can't showcase that on 4th and 3. And that's been the block for Miami defensively. You have to get them behind the sticks. And then the Dolphins in each of the last 2 weeks, they had a 2nd and 20 or a 2nd and 25, and they had a 1st and 30, and they had an illegal contact for a 5-yard penalty and automatic first down. They had a defensive holding for a 5-yard penalty and automatic first down on both of those. So you're killing yourself on the early downs defensively.
Getting Bills in 3rd and long would be helpful for sure. My number 1 thing down for the Bills is you got to get Tua Tagovailoa out of rhythm. We know that he's a very good rhythm and timing player, spot throws, anticipation. He's accurate and get the ball quickly into the hands of guys that are really fast. And so I think you've got to be very intentional about not allowing that to happen. And there's been some things with Tua this year where his first read throw percentage is down about 10%. He's holding onto the ball a little bit longer than usual. Obviously, the turnover-worthy throw rate is crazy high right now. The pressure rate's not too bad, but like you mentioned earlier, he's not negotiating pressure very well so far this year. 53% of pressure is turned into sacks, which is alarmingly high. Like normal is 15 to 20%. Even Tua, who's not great at that last year, it was 21%. And so I think there's some wrinkles that have been added to this offense that maybe everyone's not comfortable running. And I think you got to make sure that this isn't the week that they do that. And one thing about short weeks, right, is you kind of just go back to your basic stuff. You're not building this robust game plan and inventory for a new team. You're kind of going to resolve to what you do. And I would expect the Dolphins to kind of get back to some of that And it's going to be important for Buffalo to make sure that Tua can't find rhythm.
Yeah. I think the next key for Miami has been a big focus for me thus far after the last couple of years. It's been a bit of a sticking point, what the pre-snap orchestration of your offense and what time you have left on the huddle, your play calling process, your personnel process. These are the things that Tyreek Hill and Tua Tagovailoa are voicing their frustration after the week 2 game, because you thought you scored a touchdown. You went to commercial break. The referees huddled. They came back out. You had all that time on commercial break. They moved the ball back to the 26, and you had 2 tries to try to get a snap off, and you took a delay game because you got out of the huddle with 6 seconds left on the clock, and then you took a false start because everybody's firing off the ball because the clock's down and everybody's not lined up where they need to be. And even the third play after that, Tyreek Hill's getting set, and he's technically moving as the snap. We're getting everybody lined up. So Mike McDaniel said he talked to the coaches about that process, that procedural change. I'll believe it when I see it, because it's been a problem since Mike McDaniel's been here. And I don't believe in year 4 after a week 2 game, you're magically going to push the buttons that you've known this was an issue all this time. But you have to, try to find some of your personnel matchups and just let it play. And that's tough because, I talked to Teron Armstead. I went with Teron Armstead on his YouTube channel last week on Thursday. And I asked him about this. I asked him about, home versus away. It was in the spirit through Dan Campbell talking about their road, home, shift motion splits when somebody asked him a question after the week 1 loss that they had at the Packers. And I asked Teron about this, and he said the thing about the Miami offense is all of the designs of the plays are intended to look the same through the first couple steps of the snap based on X number of concepts. And when you take and strip that part of it away, it becomes a lot more predictable for what you're trying to do. So finding that balance from a coaching staff perspective, I don't know how you're going to go about maximizing that, but that's something the Dolphins have to figure out.
Yeah, the Bills don't need any help in this one, right? So clean up your operation for sure. I've got down the Bills got to test this Dolphins pass defense, right? I mean, they've given up, I think they're last in EPA per pass defensed so far this year. And you talked about Tyrell Dotson as a guy that doesn't play well in space or in coverage. What's going on at safety too, right? With next to Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think that'll be a backup player. Whoever it is, the slot situation has been really interesting. They're playing a rookie there, a 5th-round rookie. And then, look, it's Jack Jones and Rasul Douglas on the outside corners, and I think they were able to find some players that can stabilize those positions. But the challenge is this is just not a back 7 that has reps together, right? You want to be able to blend your coverages and play different things, and you've got guys that just haven't spaced the field together. And I think that's a possibility for Buffalo to go after some opportunities, whether that's man-to-man coverage or if there's zones, and challenge their ability to space and be sound on the back end and let Josh Allen kind of take his chances throwing the ball against this Dolphins back 7, right? That's had a lot of struggles so far. So I think you got to be aggressive throwing the football, and then obviously that potentially gets you a lead and you control the game script from there.
Yeah, and then the other thing for Miami is just you need to take some of the air out of the ball, and you need to try to possess the ball. Where, I mean, the Colts, their average defensive time of possession through the first 2 weeks is over 36 minutes. The next closest team going into the Monday Night Football games was a minute and a half less of time the defense was spending out on the field. And you're watching, it's the third possession of the game, and some of the defensive guys are gassed already because, the Dolphins had 7 minutes time of possession in the first half against the Colts. So I'm sitting here rooting for the Bills. If they win the toss, take the ball, please. Take this decision out of Mike McDaniel's hands.
They won't.
He refuses to do that because he wants that control of the first possession of the second half. When it's a shorter game, you want to know what your game circumstances are for strategically how you call the game. But it's one of those things, like, that's the right thing to do on paper. But I think the tonality of what your football team is, like, it would behoove you to have a possession or two that's not automatically in a negative game script, to try to let yourself create some more balance in what you want to be offensively. I think that's a key for me.
The defense has been stressed, right? And they played 133 snaps in 2 games.
Yeah.
and they have 6 defensive players that have played 99 snaps or more. The Bills have played a total of 98 defensive snaps. They're resting guys in the fourth quarter last week, and now you have a short week in Buffalo. Miami's on the road. I mean, they've got to protect that somehow, because I do sense that defense being worn down. Last thing I had down, Kyle, is pass protection. I think is going to be critical for the Bills. Miami's got good pass rushers. There's no doubt. Zach Sealer, Brad Chubb, Jalen Phillips, Matthew Judon, Chop Robinson. That's a lot of guys that can win one-on-one. I think the coverage is failing it a little bit, right? So they can't really complement the rush with the coverage, and they blitzed a ton, a 40% blitz rate, 4th highest so far in the NFL. I didn't have that down as a possibility of something I was thinking about for the Dolphins defense this year. And I think the Bills' pass blocking has been okay so far this year. It's certainly capable of being a lot better. Last week against the Jets, they were 7th highest in average time to pressure. And so obviously affecting Josh Allen's going to be huge for Miami. And so they've got one-on-one pass rushers that can win. They're blitzing, and the Bills need to be sound up front to allow Josh Allen to go after this defense. All right. There it is. Bills, Dolphins. We get to do this again in a few weeks, Kyle Crabbs. We'll see what the dynamics are later in the season. But for now, there's a football game Thursday night. Hopefully you feel ready for it, and you will stay locked into Locked On Bills, Locked On Dolphins, all the pre- and post-game coverage you could ever want coming from me and Kyle. So don't miss any of that. Make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. We're out of here, folks, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover,